Hey, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
Is your muffin buttered? Would you like us to assign someone to butter your muffin?
Excuse me?
What?
Excuse me?
What?
And welcome back to Two Guys Talking About Records. And I am Steve, a record collector.
And I'm Jim, a record store owner.
And yes, I did assign someone to butter my mother's muffin.
All right, that seemed like it was an inside joke, but you fans of the group Wet Leg probably, hopefully got it.
I watch a number of their concerts, and when they come to that, the whole audience, I mean, it used to be just, the one person, the second female singer would go, what? Now the whole audience just gone, what?
It has ingrained itself into the cult-like following.
It has, yes. Excuse me is a big part of it, yes.
It doesn't hurt that it's a great song to boot.
Nope. It's an earworm.
So how did you find out about this new music is the topic of today's podcast episode. And we will get into that here in just a couple of moments. But first, our weekly ritual of what did we torture ourselves with finding this week? Did you have a good one?
I did. There was actually one of my favorite albums of this year so far, Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit. It came out, Weather Vane's the name of the album, and it's a wonderful album. It's a storyteller album. He really looks at what's happening, what's bothering him, and goes into these wonderful stories from mental illness to mass shootings to COVID-19, and It's not a downer album. It's almost inspirational. On my broadcast, I talked about it's like a rootsier born in the USA.
Yep. And
it's really great. It rocks because he has the 400 Unit in there, but he really has something good to say. To me, it's probably his best album that he's put out. Totally enjoying this. Each listen, you hear something different in there.
You think this one's going to be a Grammy-worthy one down the line?
I do. I truly do. I think what he's, just bringing up and talking about is worth it. Yes. So we'll find out. Another one, a brand new group is called Facs, F-A-C-S, and it's called Still Life and Decay. Kind of noise rock. They're out of Chicago. They've put out a few albums. They've been around since 2018. A little bit punk, a little bit noise, but it just flows. It has a great sound to it. And, again, we'll go into this is just new music that, that I've found. It is just fascinating. Yeah, I totally enjoyed it. There's droning going on,
okay.
So always exciting there. From Vinyl Me Please, Mad Lib came in, Shades of Blue. And that came out in the early aughts. And Mad Lib, a rapper, producer, but Blue Note gave him access to their archives. So he went in, and Blue Note hadn't done this, and he was able to do any kind of sampling he wanted off Blue Note records.
Wow.
Yes.
That's interesting.
It is. And so that's why, it's called Shades of Blue. It's from the Blue Note. And so he puts on these various songs, raps, and other things with, using the Blue Note samples. I had that CD back when it came out. I loved it. I played it to death. And Vinyl Me Please just reissued it. So
okay.
I was super excited to see that.
I imagine with full access, you could do a deep dig into their archives and not just do the Blue Note stuff that everybody talks about.
Yes. The final one I picked up was a group called the 3 O'Clock. Do you remember them?
I do.
Yeah, from the 80s. A jangle band, part of the Paisley Underground. 16 Tambourines. I think that was their first full album. It's just digging into, I love the Paisley Underground sound, the whole jangle rock, where they were bringing back the Byrds, bringing back even some of the Beatles, but giving it that new spin for people that were our age, in the 20s and teens. And so I was excited to get that.
That's cool.
How about you?
Well, I just a couple this week, and one I pulled up here. I've given this a couple of listens already. Speaking of the 80s.
Yes.
When this was announced, and this was I think probably almost 2 some odd months ago, and it's just getting here. So I don't know what happened to the release, whether it was delayed, but it's called Alternative Anthems. And it's a double LP. What I mistakenly, and I think I told you about this, mistakenly thought it was all 80s alternative, but it's not. It moves from the 80s to the 90s and maybe a little beyond. But kind of like those old KTEL gatherings, except this one makes a little more sense with the grouping.
Yeah.
KTEL was like, oh, throw that in there. What the hell?
Yeah.
But this one is it's got Sonic Youth, Bikini Kill, Mudhoney, Husker Du. This is my college radio playlist days. It's a lot of stuff that's on my phone still. And it's just 2 LPs. It's colored vinyl. It's really cool. Let's see, REM, Sugar from Bob Mould is on here. The Flaming Lips, She Don't Use Jelly, which is a great song,
Yes.
but you can rarely, if ever, find that album that it's on. And it's usually I'm hot and cold with the Flaming Lips. This is one of the hot songs that I like, so I'm glad to have it broken out. The Replacements, Screaming Trees, Nearly Lost You. We're getting into the 90s. There's the Pixies, Belly, Feed the Tree. That is such a great song. Your jangle pop, or I'll call it alternative. We have Pavement in here. Camper Van Beethoven, Taking the Skinheads Bowling. Buffalo Tom and Temple of the Dog. So this is a throwback for me, and I'm having a blast with it because it is my college radio days.
Yeah, I've been debating that. The reason why, the Flaming Lips.
Yep.
I used to have that in CD, but I've just never seen it.
I've given it a couple listens, and I am thoroughly enjoying it. Maybe we'll have one here for you, and I'll try to get a couple more. The other one, again, speaking of the 80s, this popped into the store the other day with a collection, a small one. I cleaned it, and I thought, I remember this one from college radio, so I'll throw it on. It's Big Audio Dynamite and the album Tighten Up, Volume 88. And I think back, at the time, I was pretty much more into the Dead Milkmen and REM, and yes, The Clash, but this wasn't The Clash, and so I didn't pay it much never mind. We played it on the air a few times. I threw it on the table after I cleaned it up and thought, you know what? I think I misjudged this album in its earlier days. I really dig it. It's fun. So I'm going to keep this.
Is there a bullet hole in there?
There is. It's a punch hole
It's
to the
one
side.
big punch hole. Wow.
But Big Audio Dynamite, of course, it's going to have the Champagne song on there and Tighten Up. And it's fun music. It's light, and it's kind of Clash, but it's not.
I used to have that album. I remember when Big Audio Dynamite, I just jumped into them because I like the Clash. But I go, well, that's different. And some of their albums were pretty good. Some of them were a little bit, but that is a good one.
Well, this gets us to today's topic on how you discover new music. Now, in the 80s, you were really at the mercy of college radio to discover that type of music. If you were a metalhead, you'd have to listen to FM. Back then, it wasn't called classic rock. It was just rock.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to listen. I think our ability to discover new music has changed a lot over the years, especially with the advent of the internet and then the adoption of, we get into things like Napster, for crying out loud. That blew up for a lot of people discovering because it was, air quote time, it was free.
Yes.
Of sorts. But there's lots of other means. Now, let's kind of go through this. If you feel like doing it chronologically, we can. And we'll work our way to Wet Leg. And I'm trying to remember how I found out about them. But you mentioned, too, you bought Big Audio Dynamite because you knew of The Clash. And who was it that was in there that was from? Mick Jones.
No, Mick Jones.
Mick Jones.
Okay, that's it.
So you have this connection to music that you knew. You like The Clash. They were that Brit punk, but they had that flavor of ska in them. And then all of a sudden comes along Big Audio Dynamite. So, well, is this The Clash? It's not.
Yeah. For me, to start to learn about music, really it was in the 70s, and it was pure radio.
Yeah.
That was all there was. I lived in a small town. It wasn't like you had a record store. Some place would have 45s, but you would listen to the radio. Every week you would listen to the top 50 countdown.
Yep.
Casey Kasem. Yep. And you would just...
It's weekly top 40.
Yes. And as a kid, you would get there and you would be listening to this and you're hoping that maybe there'd be some cool song. Then the next week you'd run out and buy that 45. And that was the only way myself that I learned. I didn't have FM radio, didn't even really know about FM radio till college in the late 70s. So you had all this classic rock. I remember going to a store that finally did had albums, and I had a friend there, and I go, well, what album should I buy? Because I had no clue. And he picks up Led Zeppelin's Presence and goes, what about Led Zeppelin? And I go, well, who's that? And he gave that to me as my first Led Zeppelin album. And so, wow, big deal. It made a big difference.
Radio big, and again, I'm an old radio guy, so I'm going to espouse the benefits thereof. It's changed a lot since the 70s and 80s, but definitely I think the discovery factor was on the radio. But then you get into the word of mouth. And I'm going to, at the risk of sounding like an old fart Facebook meme that your parents share, how many of you remember, and I have done this, sitting at your radio with that all-in-one unit with a cassette, and you're pressing pause and play to try to get rid of the commercials to record the songs that they were playing so you could share them with your friends?
I had a lot of cassettes that way. Yes, I did. And it was the cheapest way to get the music that you wanted to have. And yes, and even when I went to college with FM, because in an FM station, they would play a whole side of an album. We were going to do deep cuts, and we would play a whole side, non-commercial, commercial free. Boy, I'd be recording all of those. And by then, I at least had a decent, recorder instead of one of those handheld cassette jobbies.
You're leaning up against the speaker trying to record. And you know what? Yeah. The audio quality was fine for that.
Yes, it was. You didn't know better. For you, hey, this is great.
But at that time, again, I went to high school in the early 80s. You're talking with friends. You got to check these guys out. Check this out. So then you start going to concerts. And you begin learning more about that artist's catalog by going to their show. We're going to play something off of our first album, and then they blow that out. And you say, well, I'm going to go buy that first album now because that rocked.
Yeah, it definitely. I kind of, none of my friends collected music. I was like the only person I thought in Nebraska that bought records. Nobody. I talk about a new song. Oh, okay, that's great. We were into music, we were into band, but nobody really listened to it until I finally found one or two that could recommend me some stuff. Once I got to college, that all changed big time. And then, you're talking to everyone in the dorm. You have stereos blasting everywhere. Everyone wanted to put your speaker outside that window. How loud can you make the music go and be cool doing it?
Now, my college experience is going to be, it's the same but different, if you speak, because I worked at the college radio station when I went to Northern Michigan University. Started there in 85, and I mean, that was the primo time for alternative college radio music. So a little bit different, because not only was I talking with friends and making new friends, but I was immersed in this, here's this week's releases, here's this stuff that's coming up. And of course, the College Music Journal, CMJ, to tie together all of these indie college radio stations. That was a tremendous time of discovery for me, coming in. I think I may have heard of REM at one point, may have heard of the Violent Femmes, but all of a sudden I've got their albums in front of me and I can play them on the air on this radio station, minus added up, of course. But I could play this stuff and learn. Then throughout my time there, it's like, okay, well, who are the Screaming Blue Messiahs? This looks interesting. Let's throw this on. And so on and so forth. So I had a little bit of an advantage as far as the discovery phase goes, because I was at that cutting edge, but I was sharing it with people through radio.
By the 80s, I was subscribing to Rolling Stone magazine, and Rolling Stone obviously had their top 100, which I would really, every week, the first thing when I would get my Rolling Stone every 2 weeks is I would look at the charts over anything else. Then by the 80s, they came up with the college alternative charts, and that was where I really began to dig into finding something new. Let's get away from, the whole top 40 thing and what else is out there? And obviously, the record reviews were there to help, though, through the years, I've learned Rolling Stone was extremely biased about certain groups. So
just maybe.
Yes.
Rush fan.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Jerks.
Yeah. If you're from San Francisco, you are awesome. If not, whatever. And so, but those charts were really important. But then I got that college music journal too. I found out about it. And they would give you that CD every month.
Yep.
And I bought so much music because of College Music Journal. Because this was the stuff that wasn't out there. This was not on the charts. And it was exciting. And you would have something. Look what I got. Well, what's that?
Now, what this is, the CMJ was a twofold thing for those of you who are unfamiliar. It was an industry magazine meant to track new releases for the artists and the labels putting these out. Folks like SST, some of the other big punk labels at the time. It would track radio station playlists, and we would report at our station. We would report weekly from what we'd played of the new releases to CMJ. They would compile them all together and average them out to show what is the most popular songs and artists for any given week throughout the 80s. And the sampler CDs that you mentioned, they would send out with their magazine reports weekly with this. Was it weekly? Yeah, it was weekly. Monthly.
It was monthly.
It was monthly on that. We would get weekly reports then at the stations at some other fashion. But they would send out the monthly CD sampler of here's some stuff to watch for in an attempt to get the radio stations and other people like you to hook on to these songs and artists.
I had hundreds of them, because it was my Bible at the time. In the 90s, I learned about music through that. And the reviews were, they were short, but they were good. By the aughts, they began to lose it. It was just, we were changing as society. People didn't want to read a lot, and articles suddenly became very small, reviews, just a little bit. And I wound up moving away from CMJ. But during the 90s, it opened my eyes to everything from the shoegaze movement, to the grunge, what was happening.
When we started the record store in 2017, one of the things and I'd been away from it for quite some time, so I looked up to see if CMJ was still a thing in 2017 because I wanted to go back to those playlists and try to see what was popular, what I should be getting, because as far as new music had gone, I was kind of drifted away from that. Mm-hmm. I found that CMJ was indeed still a thing, but it was no longer going to be. I caught them at the very tail end of their existence. They had an online presence of some sort. They hadn't done the magazine for years, but that online thing was shriveling up because it was no longer a necessity with the internet. So it was kind of a shame, but you move on from that.
Yeah, I did by the odds, but then what I found is, places like Barnes & Noble would have, 50, 60 different record magazines. And it's amazing. Almost everything was from Britain. I mean, the UK is crazy for music magazines, from Mojo, classic rock, prog rock. It's everything. And a lot of them had, again, samplers.
Yep.
And so I would be buying, at one point, I could buy up to 10 magazines in 1 month, just so I could read these reviews, find out what's happening. It was all only CDs at the time. We still can buy vinyl in the U.S. and the U.K. you could. But it was my way of looking and finding out stuff. But I had all this time to read because it was before YouTube, which would suck up my time, which it does now. But I really learned a lot through that, but they were very UK oriented. A lot of the American magazines, they weren't putting out samplers, but UK was huge into it.
Now, I want to take a step backwards in time and talk about another very influential means of exposing folks to new music, you and I at the same time. And I'm talking, of course, here about MTV.
Oh, of course.
Way back when, for you kids, MTV stands for Music Television. And there was a point in time where they played music television. They played music videos, and that was it. There was a little bit of news with that Kurt Loder dude. Mm-hmm. There was shows like 120 minutes, which was just awesome. They got a little weird with some of their reality stuff, but this was a great way because now we could visualize all the music that we'd been hearing. And it shows like 120 minutes, and yes, even Beavis and Butthead would play music that I had never heard and thought it was cool. They would play, I think the Dead Milkmen as a group owe Beavis and Butthead a great deal for exposing the world to Punk Rock Girl, and 120 minutes as well.
Yeah, when I finally, got MTV, I think it was about 82, 83, if we finally decided, okay, because you had to pay extra. You had 3 channels, and this was an extra thing. And at the time, we were young, and, well, can we really afford it? I finally says, I have to have my MTV. And so I brought that in. But it did a video could make you buy an album just because you liked the video. When you think, with MTV, with ZZ Top, Eliminator came out. Now, ZZ Top, they had a presence, but Eliminator, thanks to those videos, which basically was hot rods and hot girls. Once in a while, they would show them, but they'll be the first to admit we were too ugly to get anybody excited or to buy our music. So let's go this other route. But they introduce themselves to the world, and suddenly that album blew up, and what happens then, people go back and start buying their other things. But it was a great way to tell people, here's something that maybe you've never heard before.
That's a great example because ZZ Top existed long before Eliminator and Afterburner, playing some great blues music, some good Texas blues, but all of a sudden, here they're famous. The music stylings changed a little bit.
Yep, more
but
80s.
It became more 80s, more top 40 oriented, but look what it did for them.
Yes. And that worked, to sell your albums in the 80s. You needed a really good video.
You could talk to some music historians who would say that was a turning point where musical talent and songwriting didn't matter as much as it had previously. You've got some great songwriters in the likes of Lennon and McCartney, the Stones to some extent, Simon and Garfunkel, but all of a sudden now you've got people like Michael Jackson and Madonna who are putting out a more visual and just quite frankly, just in-your-face look, pushing that. And so, yes, okay, I'm not saying that Madonna and Michael Jackson weren't great songwriters or singers. They were, but that combined more of a total overall package where the visuals were almost as important as the actual music and songwriting itself.
Yeah, it was a change in society. Where, yes, as society now we became visual because we had all that. It's so true. In the 70s it was just you're using the radio. Your new radio is now your television set.
Video killed the radio star.
Video, yes. Ta-da! There it is. But it did open you up to a whole new world. And if they had a great video, you became really interested in that, even though you couldn't see the video as you're playing it, but it caught your attention.
We can get into the whole idea of one-hit wonders, but I think that helped facilitate the one-hit wonder even more deeply than before because you've got somebody that made such a great song and such a great music video, and then they were never able to replicate that again. We'll dig into that down the line. But
hello, Peter Schilling.
Yes, Falco.
Yes.
So as we move through the 80s into the 90s, especially into the late 90s, where all of a sudden there's this thing called the internet. And that, of course, AOL takes off first. You get some of the other bulletin board, all the old BBS stuff where people can begin sharing their likes and dislikes a lot more. And at AOL, more than anything, you could get all these different chat groups going. That was another way to share music and help discover music.
Yeah, and that was something I never got into. Yeah, and maybe by the, I'm in my 40s, and those in their 20s were really getting in, doing more of this. And I had my own way by now, again, it was through the magazine, through the CMJ, through these other ones. And I knew it was going on because every magazine I was reading was talking about this, and it's the death of music as we know it. It is going to die. It was all doomsday from this, and these people must die that have doing this, poor Napster. But there was so much sharing, and obviously you get on, but even to this day, I really don't stream.
And we talked about that
Yeah.
too. I do a little bit, but I still have the physical copies, as we talked about. Napster was an interesting foray into this because for the first time, you could more easily share. And this is still long before 5G or even broadband in some cases, where it would take you literally 20 minutes to download a song, but you would do it because it's free.
Yes.
But it wasn't so much about getting just the free music as, for me at least, is getting exposed to it. I would like to hear what this is. This is still pre-YouTube, so I want to sample this, and then if I really like it, I'll go out and get it. But the music industry's response to Napster is not, in my mind at least, was not much different than the music industry's response to cassette tapes. Instead of me sitting in front of my radio with a handheld cassette, recording a song or two to try to get, I'm just clicking, trying to download one from Napster. It's the same concept. You're just trying to work around so you don't have to pay for it to decide if you want to pay for it.
Yeah, we are taking capitalism down. We're going down in flames, baby. Look at that cassette. We will. I was working in retail, and just the whole thing with cassettes. It's like, they wanted to ban cassettes.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Yeah, because this is like, oh, my God, learn to work with technology.
Yep. Well, and then they introduced compact discs, and the record industry was like, ha-ha!
Yeah.
And then they introduced recordable compact discs, and they're like, damn it!
Yes. There's a big part of compact disc coming out to take care of that whole tape controversy.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, it drove it, but again, innovation and the need to try to get free stuff worked its way around.
Yes, it always does. We will find a way to do it.
Nature will survive. Isn't it from Jurassic Park?
Yes.
Nature finds a way. Music lovers will find a way.
Yeah. It was big, and now, and obviously it's gone into streaming. Then streaming was killing. Obviously, vinyl was going away. CDs, but then streaming started taking out CDs. Yep. Also. To this day, was it 94% we talked about music is through streaming.
It is, yeah.
And both my children, they will only stream. They're not going to buy physical. They don't need it. For me, it's the amount of time to look, just to figure out what I want on there. You go in there, I don't even know where the hell to look.
Well, it goes back to the discovery phase now, because you can still talk with friends, but albeit now you're sharing stuff on a social media platform or a page saying, check this group out. I'm tagging you in this to check this group out, much like we did with the Brown Sabbath album from a while ago. Steve, you got to check these guys out.
Yeah. Which kind of brings me to where I learn a lot about my music now is through YouTube. And it's with the vinyl community, which we both have channels. Is there's certain people that really look at new music. One of them that I really love is named Sam, the Vinyl Douche. He's down in Arizona. Just the funniest guy, but he only does new music, and today he did it. He puts samples out there, everything, he samples it, and guess what? I went and I ordered an album because he showed it. I loved what I heard, and I constantly will buy new music that I wouldn't know about. I might have to go to Bandcamp or something like that, but he plays a sample, and it grabs me. There's a number of stations or channels that will do that, and it gets you excited. That Fax album, why did I buy that Fax that we talked about at the start? Someone talked about it, and they said, this is just fantastic. Actually, a couple people. And so I went and I streamed it. Okay, someone's talked to me about it. I went and go, wow, this is really good. So YouTube's been a huge part of my looking for new music, because I do have this love of finding new stuff, but as you get older, it gets harder. And, we have the music from our past that we're still trying to bring in, but you want to find new things that are relevant.
Yep.
Last year for me, my favorite album of the year was Wet Leg. And that was something that I saw a video. I just saw one of their music videos. Yep. I go, well, that song was catchy as heck, and I can't get it out of my brain. I need to have this.
It was an earworm, and that's where I learned about Wet Leg, was from you, and I think Abby had mentioned them as well, bringing them in. And again, as much as we try, and there's so many other things going on with life that unless you are solely focused on just music, that you cannot be up on everything all the time. You have to rely on all these other sources saying, hey, check this out, Steve, Jim, check these guys out, or watching a channel like yours where you watch other channels telling you what to watch and then people watch you. It goes around, comes around.
Or you have a record store owner that kind of shoves stuff right. You got to check this. Look at this. I got an extra copy of this. Boy, that can cost you a lot.
Just in case.
Yes.
I don't mean to do it, but I know what you like.
Yes,
How's
you
that?
do. Which is what a good record store should be.
But even then, I feel as I'm only scratching the very, very tip of the iceberg on this because there's so much of it out there. I think that's one of the other old memes, too, that shows the old-timer metalhead saying it's not that your music is, whatever your new music, it's just that your music sucks and mine is better. But you're always going to have that, the personal taste coming in. I don't like the new stuff. I don't like the old stuff. Well, open yourself up to all stuff. Personally speaking, there's not a lot of new music that gets me really excited. But when I do, I get excited about it. Wet Leg was one of those cases, basically because, like you said, it's just so catchy. It's very fun. It's very airy. And I dug it. So there will always be groups that pop up on my radar that I'm into that I like. And there's others that I like, well, they're okay, but do I need to add it to my collection?
Yeah, I really try to make it a point to find new groups. I think it's important because I want to keep hearing what's coming out there. It's in my wheelhouse. I'm not buying the pop stuff that's coming out. That's not, jumping at me. It's more of the underground music that keeps coming.
Let me cross your name off the Taylor Swift pre-order. Sorry, there we go. Go
okay.
ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
But, and I do, Wet Leg was pop. Okay, that was, kind of pop punk, you could say. But, there's all this underground kind of music that I'm looking for. African music, Tenarwan just put out that new one. I didn't know it came out, but I'm just, looking around. They go, wow, they have a new one out. Let's find out what this is like.
And then there's always some surprises that come up too. And whether they be a regular addition to the collection, The Who, for example, HU, the Mongolian throat-singing death metal band, it's fun, it's cool. It's not a go-to, but it's still something that I think maybe it's fun to have in the collection and throw on once in a while. But again, you learn about this from seeing it. And again, much like in the 80s when I worked in college radio, I think I've got a little bit of an unfair advantage at the record store, but there's so much pulling me in so many different directions between used stuff coming in, running a business, that sometimes I do feel I'm slipping on that new side and I don't catch everything that I should be catching.
Well, it's hard. And when you have to go bring in new stock, you know your customers, which helps. You pretty much know your best customers, what they like and what they might be interested in. I always find a good record store, they're playing some music that's going to catch you, that's going to make you want to buy it. That happens to me constantly. I'm weak. I'm really weak. God, that sounds good. Should I wait? No, I'll just buy it now and be done with it. But when I go, I visit a lot of different record stores in my travels, and you're always looking, what's new? What are they promoting? There's one down in Toledo. Every person that worked there had their pick of the month or their pick of the week, and you would look to see what this is. And, they would have a little description, and that was always fun. I would be grabbing, some new stuff from that.
And it wasn't just the stuff that they were overstocked and needed to sell?
Well, maybe it could have been.
That's what I did.
Yes.
I'm joking.
It does happen. There's no doubt about it. We got to push this one. It's like going to a restaurant. Well, tonight our special is, not that special is you just have too much of it. It needs to go.
We have goulash.
Yes.
It's everything thrown in. Well, that's great, Steve. I think, is there another turn in this? Is there going to be something new on the horizon that helps us learn about new music? I don't see where we go from here.
AI.
Are we at the pin? Oh, well.
AI.
All right.
It's going to be
Never
looking
mind.
at what we play. It's going to be listening to you play your stereo, and it's going to tell you this is what you need.
You are right. And
Yes.
then it'll just begin creating music specifically for us at that point.
Yes, it will. And they'll be playing it for us, and we'll just, whatever it's doing, I don't know.
Well, such a bleak future on that. But unless it's cool stuff to listen to, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, we'll go from there. At least we'll be happy robot zombies.
Yes, that's the best kind. As long as I can still play a little Rush, I'll be all right.
Yes.
All right, Steve. Well, thank you very much. It's a great one again this week. And thank you all for listening to Two Guys Talking About Records, a Vinyl Community podcast. Again, as always, I guess we're welcoming comments when we get a chance.
Yes, please do. We always like to hear what your thoughts are, and see your perspective on things.
Great. Until next week, this is Jim, and I'm a record store owner.
And Steve, a record collector.
Thank you much for being here, and we will talk to you guys next time.